And welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 228. And with us already is a bevy of co-hosts.
You sound so really surprised by the by the lack of tardiness.
Robert, you trained me to just wait for about 10 minutes before you show up. Like you had to get your coffee.
Hey!
Pat's here, Lily's here.
To make a grand opening or a grand entrance, right?
With us today is Kat Mohammad, with the Director of Education for AHOA. Also is Lily Mockerman with TCRM Services. It is never sticking in my head yet, but she's really cool with revenue management if you want to know. And
you can always go for the long name, Lauren. Total customized revenue management.
It would probably be easier for me, to be honest with you, because God knows I can't seem to get that acronym set up right. And Mr. Robert Cole with Rockcheetah, thank you all for being here today. We have actually a well-curated list of Mr. Robert Cole. But besides all of that, we've had some interesting week on changes in the landscape of North America, I guess I should say. So it'd be kind of interesting also to try to include in our conversation how we see this affecting next year in some sense, because we're going into the political year. And that always has an influence on our industry.
I thought you meant Gary Larson coming back with the Far Side website.
I am happy with Gary Larson coming back from the Far Side. All my favorite comics writers, Burke Breathed is back, and so to Calvin Hobbes, and now Gary Larson. So I'm all good with all of them coming back to it. So, and let's say hi to everyone. Let's see, we have Brian, Sandra, David, Lex, Jamie. Thank you all for participating. Please know that if you have any questions or would like to join us visually, just simply let us know, and we can actually add you into the talking head screen if you would like. And of course, any questions that come through on the chat as well, by all means, please indicate them there as well. And I'm going to make sure that I say hi to everybody else on all the other channels as well. So with that in mind, is there a preference of where we'd like to start? Do you want to start with the lead story, Mr. Robert, or do you have a preference of something else?
Well, the lead story was designed purely as bait for Kat.
That's so funny.
I was about to say, if you're going to tailor one to talk about, that's the one. Kat, would you like to lead the conversation on our lead story today?
Well, sure. That is definitely one that falls in our area, especially since it involves AHLA in the story that Robert had shared, and that's the 5-star promise. So, Robert, definitely fill me in if I'm missing gaps, but ultimately, it's taking a pledge, each each hotel or company to protect your staff, either by getting portable panic buttons, brushing up on training, looking at your safety overall. But the goal is ensuring and enhancing safety for your staff and guests along the way. Right? Is that a decent overview?
Yep, very much so.
I think so. And there are now 50 hotel groups that are involved, which is fantastic. I think when they launched, they had something like 12. And you kind of look at this and go, are you sure you don't want to be a part of this? It's kind of head
common sense almost.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we should shame those who aren't. I don't know. Should we publicly shame choice? I'm sorry.
But no, it's kind of like an awakening. It is one of those where you're looking at it going, why hasn't this been thought of or focused on earlier? Why has this been such a soft spot in the awareness of what goes on in our industry, what goes on in our buildings, and having our teams adequately trained in that capacity? Mr. Stuart Butler, Fuel Travel.
Yes. How are you? One of our past and very recent webinar speakers, Stuart presented for us just yesterday and did a great job. And Lily.
I've got a bone to pick with Stuart. Was on the HSMAI Marketing Advisory Board call yesterday. It seemed he was standing and that sort of thing. We're relatively highly engaged. For this show, he always sits.
I stood once, and I think Ed called me out on it. So today I'm sitting. Yeah. I sit twice a day. Once when I eat a sandwich at my desk, and then on this show once on a Friday too. So
once on a Friday.
Well, we are
part of your lack of exercise regimen. Yep. Okay, that's good. So.
And for those of you that sit all day, every day, stop it. It will kill you. So
it's worse than smoking.
If you look at the data behind it, it's one of the most unhealthy things you can do. So get a stand-up desk, and you will feel.
Nope, he's frozen.
Oh my God! I thought he had a heart attack right there.
Right?
Massive coronary.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Stewart, to bring you to speed on our conversation, we were talking about the lead article, in which was, I understand from Robert's perspective, topic bait for Kat, because she is such a good advocate on this. cause. But we were talking about the common sense of this, and then Robert started trying to shame by name companies that haven't participated. So you kind of jumped at the right perfect time.
Okay. I'm all about shaming people that don't do things that are commonsensical, for sure.
I would say last year or this year, 2019, because we're still in it, right? There, from our end, we are hearing a pretty significant uptick in demand letters and lawsuits related to the hashtag #MeToos, to human trafficking awareness training, along with ADA. Those are probably our top three, honestly, that we're hearing about. So it makes sense that this movement is getting, larger at this point. And I expect it to really grow next year. I was mentioning January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, so a lot of different hospitality companies are getting behind the initiative and trying different things to push awareness on human trafficking. And I mean, that's the sex trafficking side as well as the labor trafficking side. So I think this article is certainly timely, and it, like I said, it's so funny how things that just seem like common sense and seem like the right thing to do just isn't, just requires incentivizing.
Well, yeah, because people look at it as a cost sometimes versus it being the right. And you brought up ADA. It's exactly the same. We have so many conversations with folks who are like, well, I'm weighing up the cost of settling the lawsuits versus investing in updating my infrastructure. I'm like, that's not the point. Like, it's not about the money. It's the right thing to do. You're discriminating against people that can't use your technology, so you got to do the right thing. And I think in an industry where I would argue that probably
He's stuck.
Can you hear me? Did it freeze? You back? I'm back.
Yeah. No, you just froze for
He's been up a little bit. Yeah.
at a very inappropriate time.
In an industry where human assets are the most important thing we have, and where it's so competitive to get employees right now, to focus on employee safety and well-being is such a good long-term investment anyway, but it's still the right thing to do. And then on the human trafficking side, whether we like it or not, the hospitality industry is a part of that ecosystem, an unwitting part in most cases. But if we can do anything,
This is really good.
Responsibility. Yeah. Do I keep phrasing? Is that what's
happening? Stuart, I think Fuel Travel needs to upgrade its internet access, perhaps. Perhaps while you're sitting at your desk and not walking.
Well, I will make a couple of comments.
They're all watching. The reason Stuart does that is they're all watching Netflix, obviously, at the same time. And Stuart isn't just hounding them and looking over their shoulders. So.
I will say this, though. I think your microphone is not coming from your headset. It sounds like it might be coming elsewhere.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes a difference or not. But
let me investigate. Hold on.
Okay. Now, very quickly, I'd like to add to the other topic to the ADA that hotels under the minimum compliance also should be embarrassed, because a lot of times when we talk to hotels about featuring their ADA compliance value proposition, like, oh, no, because they have to get on the ramp in the back of the hotel because we don't have a ramp in the front of it's like, if you're embarrassed about how you're providing that level of service to your guests that have travel assistance needs, then shame on you. You should be taking the time to correctly create the infrastructure. Now, I understand historic buildings and so forth have its limitations. There are some structural things that you can't do, but you still have technology that helps with that even still. So there's really almost no excuse to say that you shouldn't be proud of your ADA compliance as a guest service profile to your guests, not just a minimum compliance requirement.
And oddly enough, if you really invest in it and make it a part of your daily process and keep it top of mind for you and your staff, you create an experience that other hotels aren't offering. So you become more marketable and you capture an entire niche group that would want to just come to your hotel because it's the most accessible or, is much easier to get to than the others. So there's revenue benefits in addition to the moral obligations of investing in it.
It's amazing when you demonstrate your commitment to a group of people and to support your guests that they might be interested in staying with you.
Well, this goes back a long time ago, before the internet almost. But back in the early 2000s, I went and attended a conference about the special travel need guest market, because we had hotels in Florida that we did simple things like making sure the refrigerators were always available for those who needed it, to store their insulin and so forth and so on. And I was so taken away by the presenter as to the things we should be doing for our guests at that need level, and that we weren't. And I said, well, how do I go over and advertise to this group that we have this desire to service them at this level of demand? He says, look, he says, if you provide quality of service to any of the people that have these requirements, they are literally the first social network. They're the ones that tell all the people that have the same travel demands that these hotels have these accommodations. The word will spread on its own. And this was before we had social to really convey the message as much, that these people would literally keep in communication because of their special requirements, that these hotels had these requirements. And it's a very low group. It wasn't rate generated. It was quality of service generated, which ultimately is what we like best, is that people pick us out because of what we're offering as a service, as you said. So.
Yeah, and oddly enough, under ADA, the accessibility features within the hotel is one side of it, but we're seeing a much larger increase on website accessibility, which is actually not even monitored under ADA. It's a totally separate organization. So we have been getting a lot of calls on that and doing a lot of education. Because of it, next year at our convention, we're looking to host a session dedicated to just responding to demand letters and lawsuits related to ADA website compliance. Surf by lawsuits. It's so easy for any attorney or whomever to check websites and see if you're if you're able to book a room. If that's the biggest part of making a reservation is so difficult.
I'm glad that Stuart's popping back in, because Stuart actually is an expert in this area, because their booking engine is, I think, right now one of the only that is ADA compliant. Is that right, Stuart?
Well, we got to be careful throwing around that word, because, like Kat said, there's not really ADA compliance that governs websites.
There's no baseline.
The DOJ hasn't actually ruled on it. So the best thing we can do is the proxy, which is the WCAG 2.1 AA standards, seems to be the most applicable and seems to be the thing that you can is defensible in court. So yeah, our booking engine, we've got a couple of minor tweaks to finish that up, but we've gone and worked and invested a lot in making sure everything throughout the booking process is completely WCAG compliant.
Well, okay.
Am I freezing again? Is it still happening?
Yeah, you're still
you are
stuck again.
Dang it.
It seems like your internet signal is maybe dropping on a pretty regular cycle.
Let me try.
What time is it? When does Stuart freeze? But yes, it is, as you said, Kat, that the drive-by legal suits and so forth. Some of the things that hoteliers can do, one is to be compliant as much as possible. But even the mistake of having one image without a poor description can throw you out of compliance, as it were, if it were to be snapshotted. But making sure that you have the navigation necessary for people that have challenges to it, have opportunities for people to be able to communicate correctly through the site, have your ADA service profile on its own dedicated site. But more importantly is to seek out and look at monthly your ADA compliance check, do a software check of your site, and make sure that you have a log. Because when you do get hit with these lawsuits, the first thing your lawyer is going to be looking for is like, okay, so prove to me that we're doing something. And you want to show that you're trying to monitor your site, that these are the things we've installed on the site. This is what we have on the site. Even if you can hire the live compliance testing, where they're going over and you have a live support team that goes in with the auditing of the site in the live circumstance. Those things all go to your benefit when you're dealing with the legalities of fighting those kind of you said surf by lawsuits and so forth. So.
Yeah, there's a few companies like DigiPro, ADA Shield, that they run they could check your website for you remotely. I just wanted to throw in there too, before we move on from this topic, that when it comes to your website, it's not just the main site that you have for your property, whether you're independent or branded. It also includes the microsites and then your OTA listings. So if you're getting your site compliant, keep in mind that there's multiple areas you have to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would add to that too, that it's not just a one-time you're done once that you checked it off a list, right? You've got to continue to monitor because at any point you can add content to the website that takes it out of being compliant. So it could be as simple as adding an image to your website without an alt text, and now all of a sudden a screen reader doesn't know what that image is. Now you're out of compliance. So you have to invest up front to make sure it's up to snuff, but then you have to continually monitor. And a lot of these services now, they offer that ongoing monitoring as, at low cost. So you should definitely invest in that, because when a lawsuit does happen, having documentation that you're proactive and that you're actively monitoring is going to improve your chances of getting those cases dismissed.
So, Robert, if you dropped that article in for conversation bait for Cat, am I assuming that you dropped in the once and future history of distribution in 5 parts for Lily?
Well, I figured the Cat thing was either that or talking about her new movie that's just debuted, Cats, I believe, right? Is that?
Oh my God, that remade version of the old Broadway show.
That was just actually to fend off Stuart, because I don't know if Tim is currently watching The Rise of Skywalker. He had a 9 a.m. ticket to see the show, and I believe Stuart has already seen the movie.
Of course,
so,
yep.
Yeah, so I figured at one point they might try to take over. So just a little preemptive work of bringing up another movie. So
for the free review right here.
So Lily, would you want to discuss the distribution conversation? Do you think that's a viable one to throw into?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a well-written article. It was very nice kind of summary of the steps of the history of distribution for sure, and kind of what we're looking at today. I was really pleased to see that revenue and marketing were thrown together. As we know from our conversation last week, sales needs a seat at that table too, which I think is not getting as much attention in the media right now. And that was the one thing I was disappointed in the article with, because I think that maybe revenue is kind of seen as overseeing both sales and leisure bookings, transient bookings. But in many cases, sales needs to have a similar seat at the table that marketing would have with revenue management, really having that three-way kind of working together scenario. And I think that that's really important. So that's the one area that I thought that the article could have been enhanced a little bit. Other than that, I'm just a big fan of King Arthur and all of that, so I love the title. But yeah, I thought it was really concise, not too much other than that. It was very straightforward, I think, very educational.
Yep, Flo definitely knows her stuff. It was written by Flo Lugli of Navicent Consulting. There were actually a couple points I wanted to bring out with the very dawn of the...
Hey, Tim, you're upside down.
He's upside down?
Mm-hmm.
Not for me.
No, he's not.
Is he not? He's totally upside down on mine.
I
mean, I'm not.
You are having a day. You are having a day.
I will take a screenshot, but he's totally upside down on mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Friday the 13th was last.
I mean, the camera's pointing at the ceiling, but I'm not.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
All right.
Is the force with you today, Mr. Young Tim Peter?
All I can say is
David says yes, he is upside down. Perhaps Tim is engaging in some A/B testing today.
Wow! Yeah.
Wow!
Thank you, David. We didn't, because he looks.
I'm
fine
not crazy. Thank you, David. That's awesome.
No, that does not get you off the hook.
Those are two mutually exclusive things, Stuart.
I took a screenshot. I have evidence.
I would like to point out I'm not actually upside down. I'm just hammered. The little holiday cheer.
Holiday cheer.
So
we were talking a little bit, just to get you to speed, Mr. Tim. We were talking about the article that Robert provided, which was the once and future history of distribution in 5 parts, which was the HSMAI article. Kind of give a little bit of the life and times of. But the one thing, and I bring this point out too that you made, Lily, is that it hasn't really totally clarified the role of sales in the communication stream. It seems like sales gets interjected only at the time of supply of data, like what do you have on the books, or what is this that you're doing, but not really on the earlier conversations, which is what is our capacities, capabilities, what do you envision we could do? I don't see that it's still we've addressed that. How do they become a part of the earlier conversations in the revenue strategy process, rather than now that we've decided what we're doing, let's go check with sales and see what they can provide based on what they're going to have. I don't know, is that ever going to be a fix? Because they do have that, as Holly pointed out last week, this kind of temporal. It's not really real until it's real. It usually only happens till the very end. It's not really confirmed until it's signed. They have their own logistics issues in that way. So I don't know. Is there any hope of that ever changing, or is that just the way of the world?
No, I don't think that that's ever going to change. And I'm going to base that on the fact that most of my hotels have very few transient reservations on the books in 6 months either.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out, the strategies we're putting into place in transient are also the same way as group. I think that it's almost the fact that with groups, you have more information, you have a specific contact, you know what the demand is for, as opposed to a bunch of little pieces flying everywhere, that there's more attention on the fact that we're not sure if it's going to materialize. But in reality, I mean, that's a revenue manager's life every day with every single guest on the transient side. It's just not done in bulk. So I don't necessarily see that they have a greater challenge in that area. I think it's more alike than maybe people give it credit for.
I'm gonna bring up. I'll put my Ed hat on for a second because he loves doing the antithesis of something. So, with our ability to look forward enough now on event-driven and business cycles, and with the data that is now being hopefully shared between revenue management and marketing, that we have this clearer front look view of what our year might look like. Could we not go earlier to sales and say, hey, before we just push the jeepers out of transient sales, is there ways that we can draw business from your perspective around this stuff? And
right.
See, do we have that kind of put the carrot on the stick for them earlier or something like that? I mean,
yeah, and that's, I think, why they need to be part of this revenue and marketing conversation, very much so, because we all need to be aligned. I mean, marketing goes out to our group guests just as much as it goes out to our transient guests. So sure, you can push some experiential packages for the leisure travel, but if marketing is only appealing to the leisure guest, then we're doing something wrong if you're in a hotel where you're not only a leisure hotel. There's a very few in the world that don't also do some group. And so if you're also doing group, then your marketing needs to be aligned with that. You should have a group marketing strategy and a transient marketing strategy, and ideally a transient corporate marketing strategy. They're all going to be a little bit different depending on the target demographic. We can't continue in this marketing wave of just putting something out and seeing what sticks because we don't know who our target audience is. That is always the number one step, is people have to get in there and determine their demographics.
I'd also add to that too, and to be fair, we don't work with a lot of heavily reliant on group properties. A lot of ours are heavily on the transient side, but I think that the same thing applies, and that is people don't look at historical data nearly enough to understand the trends that are going to happen when they're coming up with their strategy and their approach for the next year. Like a lot of folks still will look at January and say, okay, what do I need to push in January for the next few months? They're not looking at a 12-month calendar and saying, here are the places where we could do better next year. Let's determine what our marketing strategy is for all our audiences to try to drive those soft periods, because those soft periods are usually pretty predictable if you go back and look historically at the last 3 or 4 years. But people aren't doing that. They're waiting until panic mode sets in and then trying to do fire sales and things like that to drive last minute business instead of getting ahead of it. Like, it's crazy to me how many people are leveraging things like Cyber Monday now really effectively, but they're driving business on the books for the peak times. It's like, we'll try to use those kind of opportunities to drive the low times, because that's really where you need the most help. So,
yeah, it's one of my favorite definitions of marketing, and I think people forget this sometimes, is marketing is next quarter's sales. And if your marketing plan isn't thinking about what sales will be on the books 3, 4, 5 months out, you're really not thinking about it the right way, honestly.
Right.
You're thinking about this last minute knee-jerk stuff. We live in an environment, and you guys have heard me rant about this, I don't know, a million times on this show, that, we live in an environment where there's so much rate transparency. Everybody knows what your rates are. You can't drop price at the last minute and actually have that be a winning strategy. It just becomes a race to the bottom, right? And so
it trains
really
bad habits.
And it trains incredibly bad habits. And I mean, how much last minute, discounting results in cancel and rebooks from folks who, were on the books, but hey, you just gave me the same room that I was going to take anyway, but at a discounted rate. It's just no way to run your business. So you've got to be looking forward, as exactly as Stuart said, and exactly as Lily said, 3, 4, 5 months out, and say, okay, what are we doing to make sure we're pacing correctly for those periods, so that we're actually not, forced into a fire sale situation.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, I have
One
a
of the-
question for you guys too. When you're done, go ahead, Robert.
I was just going to say on the distribution end, a couple of things happen that also isolate sales, because the whole GDS thing is the GDSs still require there's one chain code for every brand, right? And so it doesn't matter if that's IBM or whatever, that's all getting through, and those are all sales efforts, right, to negotiate those rates or establish whatever preferred corporate rates, and it does kind of get filtered through the GDS. And then the other problem on the GDS side is, Flo mentioned the actual, I think she said Galileo and probably meant Apollo, back in terms of the original GDSs, but two pieces of very interesting trivia. The Sabre platform, the Sabre hotel product platform on the GDS came from an Apollo license. So that was in 1984. They actually licensed the technology from United. American licensed it from United. And then number two, she mentioned that there's still problems with content in that area. That's because all that content is stored in the BAS, the BAS, which stands for Basic Air Segment. So when you kind of look at that, you go, oh, I see. So Sabre's thing was basically borrowed from someone else who developed it, and they both of them crammed all this stuff into an air segment. That's kind of how you start, and then you look at the volume of business. I don't know what percentage of corporate business still goes through the GDSs, but it's still a massive, massive proportion. It's amazing. So.
I still believe to the end of our days, Mr. Robert, that we're going to go to the Library of Hospitality, and you're going to be the little codger behind the desk that flops out the big book, that pulls it open. So this is back happened in 1210.
Yeah.
Oh, Tim.
So,
Tim, I can't. Your audio's off. Tim, audio's off. Nope.
It's still off.
And he's still upside down.
No, he's not.
He sure is. I just sent you a screenshot.
He looked fine. Well, okay. It did tip me off because in that picture that you sent, he did seem to have hair on the top of his head. I think that did look a little odd. I don't know. So, yeah.
on the chat said he was upside down too.
It was a deep fake. That's all it was.
That's what it must be.
So I wanted to ask you all, since you're bringing up
to me. That's good. Yeah,
conversations on distribution. So one of the things that we have been planning for 2020 is there's much more talk around this downward cycle, that the market is finally going on a downturn. So we were looking at adding a session related to how to prepare for that. What is the opinion of those on this panel? And I'm curious if you are looking at that as a greater potential, even with the CBR reporting and different things coming out, it looks like the trends are going in that direction. Are you having any conversations with your hotel clients now about it?
Nope, Tim, nothing. Nope, no audio. It's not there. Oh,
Did
no.
somebody mute him?
No, he's on.
So you've clicked the little blue button at the bottom of the screen?
I turned it on because it wasn't on, Tim. I think you're on now. Try it now. Nope, no, he's gone.
No, well, I don't know.
Huh. That's weird.
Okay, yeah. Who knows? One thing for this downturn is if you look at kind of the CBRE, STR, all the main forecasts for the coming year, they're kind of like, it's flat, almost, up 1%. Every year, those initial forecasts that come out December, January for the following year, they get revised down. Very often, 2, 3, 4 times. And I mean, there is a pattern now, and I haven't gone, I'm actually probably over the holidays, if I have a little bit of time, I'm going to go figure out exactly what that pattern is. Because that should suddenly be baked into everyone's forecast, because obviously their projection models aren't being adjusted for predicting this. I mean, if you have a model that always winds up lowering, you should probably have that off the bat. So, yeah, the indications are next year is not going to be great, especially if the same pattern comes out that the kind of mediocre projections are turning down, and certainly election years are always troubling for the hotel industry as well. So,
Tim, I think we got
whammy.
Your market share
So
will
can
be-
you?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Tim.
Okay, so I'm going to be the contrarian here. I mean, yeah, and I know there's a lot of background noise. I'm going to mute in between talking as I've been doing. Sorry, I'm in a remote location today, so sorry about that. So I'm going to be the contrarian here. Everything that I'm seeing, everything I've talked to, suggests that we're probably not going to see a downturn this coming year. We're not going to see a downturn in 2020 with a whole bunch of caveats. And the whole bunch of caveats are there are undoubtedly some markets who are already in recession and probably have been in recession for some time. So it's like like historic recessions, it's going to be market by market. So if you're in a market that's struggling right now, it doesn't matter what happens in 2020. You're already in recession. There are going to be a lot of markets that are going to be fine, but almost everything that I'm seeing, everybody I'm talking to, I think a lot of folks here know this. I do a lot of work with the Conference Board, who does the Consumer Confidence Report. They do a lot of economic research and a lot of economic forecasts. And then obviously some discussions I've been having with some other folks because of my relationship with the Conference Board. The suggestion is that the markets that are strong won't be in recession, but the growth will be slower than we've seen. So it's not, we've been on an upturn for a long time. We are in a record period of growth. And if you're in a good market, you're probably not going to see the kind of growth you've seen in the last couple of years. But the likelihood is across the board, it won't be a recession. It will just depend on, is your market struggling more than the average, or is the market itself in some recession because it caters to an industry like manufacturing or oil, which are in some, relatively tough straits at the moment. So don't look at what the economy is doing. Look at what your local market is doing.
Yeah.
What your
overall macro though for the U.S. hotel industry, the 52-week moving average for RevPAR is up 0.8% year over year, right? That's not very robust. And again, when you have wages, the net operating profit squeeze is going to be real though, because you have wages that are rising faster than your revenues, and a lot of the other costs, right, are going up. Certainly, distribution costs are continuing to rise and things like that. But that's tough for the owners.
So it sounds like it's
the
time
one thing
for me
we
to get on
tell.
my soapbox here. But Tim, I'll allow you to finish first.
The one thing I'm going to say that way, I'm trying to stay on mute as much as possible because I'm in a fairly noisy place. But the one thing that I would say is we always try to counsel, our clients. And I think this is the first time we've met, so I hope I pronounced your name correctly there. But since it was your question, the one thing we always advise our clients is what you should do every time there's any kind of softness in your market. There's two things you want to do. The first is you really want to make the recession your competitor's problem. Right. And the way you do that is it's a great time to invest appropriately in marketing. It doesn't mean you go whole hog. You want to keep a little powder dry and all that kind of stuff. But you want to look at opportunities to steal market share, because if everybody else in your market is pulling back, the worst thing you can do is pull back with them. What you want to do is invest strategically to go and steal share from them. And, if the market is flat year on year and they're pulling back because they're worried about flat from flat, well, guess what? That's less competition in search. That's less competition in display. That's less competition in sales. That's less competition to drive direct business to your property. And you'd be foolish to let that go by, because every time their competition goes down, your cost to acquire guests goes down.
Right.
Absolutely. So take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So it's funny timing that we stumble onto this topic today, because literally just this morning we posted a blog about the possibility of a recession. I'm going to drop it in here in case anybody is interested.
Excellent.
I don't know why I have two last names in here, but anyway. So we have been very carefully watching this. Of course, from the revenue management perspective, it's critical to our business. And we're very happy with the latest reports from STAR of the month ending for November, the week ending that came out this week. Really across the board, everything seems to be looking a little bit stronger, even reports coming out of CNBC, et cetera. So this article expounds a little bit on the various things that we're looking at. But it's really our position at this time that we don't see an imminent recession. We do see a slowing down or really more of an absorption of growth in demand with the new supply, but we don't see things going backwards. I think that, when you're in a plane and you're taking off, you can't keep going at that trajectory forever, right? Like at some point, you have to level off. So we see 2020 as the year of leveling off. And I think that's really important for the industry to understand, because too many people are assuming a recession is coming. And to your point, there are certainly markets and countries that are affected by recession right now. But as a whole, I don't see the U.S. economy teetering on the brink of another 2009. And I think it's really important that we don't cause it by being too excited about the fact that there might be a recession and trying to get ahead of something that's not even happening and allowing it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I see Tim and I are on the same page here. And also to Robert's point of the rising distribution costs and everything, it's also critical that hoteliers know their numbers going into 2020, not their ADR, their GOPAR, their total revenue per available room, their average revenue per guest. This is the year to start your total revenue program. This is the year to measure everything in profitability and not in average rate. So I'll step back off my soapbox now.
That's really great to hear, actually. Excuse me, it's hopeful, because once folks get in this spiral of, oh no, the sky is falling,
right?
It just continues.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges this industry has, right? Is that there's a lot of people that just parrot what they hear from other folks, and it really started at the beginning of last year, where people started raising that flag and saying, is there a softening happening? Some of the data suggests, and then by the end of the year, it was every conference, it was a major topic. Is there a recession coming? Is there a recession coming? And all the people speculating on this, or 99% of the people speculating, are not experts on the economy, don't really have facts behind them. It's opinion-based, based on what they heard at the last conference. And so it does become the risk of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when fear exists, and it changes behavior, and if behavior changes in a way that's going to catalyze a recession, then we're all going to be in trouble. So,
I'm going to echo something Lewis is pointing out into the chat. Also, international traffic is slowing down. That's been
absolutely.
There's been an influx on that for some markets like New York, especially, that I'm particularly aware of, and so forth, where it's down in the 40 percentile plus of our historicals. But you got to but you got to think that there's influencing factors in our market now that has never existed before. We have open dialogue on social and polarities of opinions. We haven't learned how to mature our communications. We're if you're not in my team, we're like Sith today. Since it's Star Wars Day, we deal in absolutes. If you're not completely in agreement with me, then you're absolutely not. You're not my friend, kind of thing. Where there's this idea of compromise, that you can be disagreeing with somebody but still be friendly with them. Doesn't exist anymore. It's like, if you're not completely like me, then you're against me. Well, that is also influencing our travel decisions to things. I didn't even have to know it. I don't hear you, but I can read your lips. But the idea of this is that there's influencing factors in different markets too. The people that point to this stuff first are usually ones that are looking for the excuse of why they're not performing. Oh, look, it's an economy. It's great. It's the people that know what they're doing. They're not jumping around. It's the first indication of things. They already have known and seen things before these people start waving a hand and pointing at stuff. So as these people wave their hand at these things to try to find an excuse, as I would think, to why their inefficiencies are created, I think it goes a lot with this conversation of why it turns into a buzzword and a topic, that it gets thrown into conference conversations, because people are looking for the buzzy conversational stuff to it. So,
yeah. And to reiterate what Tim said, I'm actually excited about it right now, because so many people are fear-mongering and people are behaving irrationally like they always do when this happens, pulling back on their marketing budget. And we're we're being strategic about it. Like Tim said, it's a great opportunity to steal market share if you're in the right markets.
I know I've said this story before, but back when we had the big 2008, it was the most frustrating time with the company I worked with, because where I was battling competition in all the markets by inches, all of a sudden they did what Tim said. They shuttered up, they pulled back, and I'm sitting there, and my company did the same thing, and I'm screaming at them, I was like, guys, I can take miles of marketing space up now. I can be dominant in our markets for spending no more money. Just let me do what I'm doing. But they're like, nope, batten the hatches. Let's stop spending. It's like, you're doing everything wrong like they're doing wrong. So
you think we'd learn, right? Because if you look at when the OTAs really became dominant, it was during a recession when demand had decreased, and probably the 2001 kind of time period after that happened is when they really took off, because people didn't know how to turn the faucet back on. And the only thing they could do was turn to the OTAs. Well, guess what? You're already oversaturated on the OTAs. You don't have a faucet to turn on now. So all you're going to do by turning off your marketing right now is erode your margins, because where the bookings are going to come from are going to be more costly than you spending money to drive demand to your own booking engine.
Right.
Tim's back with us. Go ahead,
Can you guys hear me again?
Yep.
Yeah. Lewis said, Expedia was really born on 9/11, and that's absolutely true. I mean, 100%. It's 100% true. One of the best things my old boss did, and I'm going to humble brag on this one, but really my boss was the one who signed off on this. I worked for leading hotels during the 2008-2009 economy. We ranked number 1 in organic for luxury hotels. We also paid for things like that, and search volume for luxury hotels vanished on November of 2008, right? People weren't searching for luxury hotels. They were searching for discount hotels and cheap hotels and really, really, really cheap hotels. And we took a big hit in traffic. We took a big hit in revenue and things like that. And my boss, Ted Tang, came to me and he said, we've really got to cut your spend dramatically. And I said, here's the thing, Ted. I said, everything we do is performance-based marketing. Every time we put $1 into the market, we make $4 back, $5 back, $6 back, $10 back. And so if we stop spending right now, we may as well fold our tents and go home, because literally we are turning off the spigot of what little spigot of revenue there was. We'd be shutting down to zero. So I said, I know things are tough. I know we were struggling with some expense things and the like, but I said it made absolutely no sense to stop any of our performance-based marketing. And in fact, if we can find a couple of extra bucks, it would be great to throw that into the areas where we can win, where people still are searching. And to his credit, he said, you're absolutely right. Let me go find you money from other places. We, don't stop doing what you're doing. We will figure out a way to find it someplace else. And, it really made a huge difference for us, and it made a huge difference for our hotels, because a lot of our hotels pulled back and we were able to drive more contribution to them because we were filling a gap that they either couldn't or wouldn't fill on their own.
Right. Now, Lewis pointed out also, since he's active in our conversation, thank you, Lewis, for that. Search changed all of that, though. And it's true, search did impact this, but now we have to also consider that search as we know it today isn't what it was back then, because now, being mobile-based and the dominance of Google's content before all else, we're not in the same reactionary capability of showing up correctly for content as easily. I would say, actually easily.
And you have to pay for you're paying for your traffic now.
Yeah, now you more so than ever have to really pay for that existence. In that
One
space.
thing, just on the recession note, though, and I'm not saying there's going to be a recession, and no one ever knows. Nobody expected the global financial crisis or 9/11 or anything like that. But things are just flat, right? That's just, things aren't going. The last 3 years, if you look at the year-end, U.S. hotel occupancy, it's traded in like a 0.2% range. It's like 66.3 to 66.5% occupancy. That's it. It's not going anywhere, right? So don't think that you're just. The only way you can get business is to shift share, right? And if it's a down market, that's the only time you really grow share. I mean, that's kind of marketing 101. And that's what the OTAs have always been very, 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 very good at doing. The one thing before the global financial crisis, the big concern is things were actually down a couple points of occupancy in the months and quarters rolling up to it, and people weren't really noticing it, but things were not doing that great from occupancy perspective. Demand had dropped off, but then you had that kind of catalyzing event, and that's the real challenge. So hopefully, if we can avoid those events, we should be okay, because again, it's a peak that it's just this nice long plateau, but at some point it's going to come down, folks, and nobody knows when. So you might as well start preparing yourself, now to start figuring out how you are going to steal share.
Well, this goes back full circle to what Tim pointed out. If you're not planning 5 to 6 months out in front of yourself right now, you're going to find yourself getting caught with this if there is a change or a turn or an unpredictability to the process, you're going to find yourself scrambling and being behind the ball instead of in front of it when it comes to being able to properly strategize.
Yeah.
That's when you hire
If I could just add one thing to that. By the way, I apologize. I'm only going to be on the show for a little while, it appears, because this live webinar steals battery on iPads like crazy. My battery is rapidly approaching zero. But one thing I did want to say is, obviously, when we all just went through our planning process for 2020, and the point I want to make is you should have an overarching plan for what you're going to do next year, and you probably do. But also you should have a very well detailed tactical plan. And when we talk about what you're doing, 3, 4, 5, 6 months out, that's where the tactical plan needs to have some fluidity in it. That ties back to what is your operating plan? What is your strategic plan for 2020? And so, you're readjusting, but you should still be focused towards how do we get to that same objective we set in August or September or whenever it happened to be.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lily.
Or if you're a fuel marketing client, you just give all your money to fuel and trust them. They'll be fine. Right?
Yeah,
right,
I would say that's true of most agencies, but we are one of the few exceptions where we actually hold ourselves accountable.
I think from my perspective, what I was going to say on that is, regardless of the fact that we don't necessarily believe that there's a recession coming, we don't think there's a reception either, just for the record. But even without a recession coming, to Robert's point, anything can happen. There could be a black swan event. We live in a very politically charged world. God forbid we have some sort of a terrorist event like we did at 9/11, but there's always something that can be completely unforeseen. And so we do encourage all of our hotels to prepare what we like to think of as the exit strategy, right? Just like every time you get on a plane, do they expect it to crash? No, but they are definitely going to go through the safety demonstration and let you know what to happen if the cabin loses pressure or whatever. So I seem to be using a lot of flight examples today. I guess I feel like flying somewhere. But really, it's a great example. You have to have that plan in place because historically, I would say less than 10%, if I had to guess, of hotels have ever put into place a worst case scenario in case of a black swan event type of budget or plan based on the upcoming year. And honestly, I think it should be a part of the budget and marketing plan process every single year so that you're in alignment with your entire team, with your ownership, with your management company, with your brand if needed, to explain what are we going to do if this happens? Are we going to race to the bottom? Are we going to try to hold rate even if it seems to be affecting occupancy? What is our appetite for losing occupancy as opposed to rate? Really kind of coming to a conclusion on that. And that's how you start to create sustainable, profitable progress for your hotel, because otherwise you're going to have a knee-jerk reaction like hospitality industry loves to do, and you're going to end up making the decisions that are terrible for the hotel.
I think it goes back to one of our also earlier conversations when it comes to having the same, when we're talking about convergence last week especially, we're talking about having the same KPIs, the same goals, because for this to be truly adaptive and team-centric is marketing can't just keep going on its merry way and revenue management sees something at a cliff coming up, but marketing is, we're just doing same old because we're not talking the same things. This collaborative conversation should be progressive so that as these things become aware of whatever data comes from this, then we can go over and make adaptation. And by the way, we do have Henry Woodman from Ice Portal, which is now Shinji, right? Am I saying that right, Robert?
No, you never say it right.
Gigi.
I never say it right.
Yeah.
That's all right. Kat, I can't even tell her first name correctly, so it's like I suck as a host. Anyway, so he's in the background, but the same kind of conversations where before we're under the convergence idea is that these things have to be discussed well ahead of the time that you just react to them, and that only happens from having the same vernacular.
Yeah, and I think from a marketing perspective, Tim, gave a great story, right, about when he was leading hotels and how he was able to measure and demonstrate the effectiveness of every penny he spent. And I think the industry at large isn't in that comfortable position, which is a shame because we have had, a decade of unprecedented success and health in the industry, and folks have gotten comfortable to where they're throwing money at things that are speculative, and you should always be testing for sure. But I think a lot of marketers are still caught up on vanity metrics, and they're certainly over-reliant on metrics being provided by the vendor themselves. And so and a lot of people haven't figured out an attribution model that they're really comfortable with when they're looking at, the grand scheme of marketing. So there's very few people that I come across that are in a position to be able to demonstrably show, hey, this dollar invested here makes this to the bottom line. And I think that's a shame, but it's also a fixable problem and an opportunity. So now is the time. If you are not in that position like Tim was back in 2008, 2009, you need to be there by the end of 2020, because if you're not and there is a downturn, then your ownership is going to come to you and say, cut your marketing budget, and you are going to be in a race to the bottom, and you are going to become more reliant on OTAs, and you probably will be out of a job because the profit margins won't be there for your business. So if you're a marketer watching this, go figure out your attribution model today. Go figure out what's working, what's not. If you cannot measure it, go find something you can measure, because there's so many things you can measure today.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would say to that is, we didn't have a perfect attribution model by any stretch. What we did have was a model that was good enough that gave us a sense of, again, in a blended environment, if we spend $1 here, we know we're getting dollars back over here. The challenge with attribution modeling is, like many things you've never done before in life, there's this myth of attribution modeling. It says, everybody wants to do it. Everybody claims they're doing it. Everybody thinks they're better at it than they are. And afterwards, they're surprised it wasn't as much fun or as good as they thought it was.
And that analogy that you're using, Tim, is normally related to sex in high school, I believe.
I did not say that. I'm simply talking about attribution modeling. Get your mind out of the gutter there.
Henry started.
That's not the gutter. That I just
he demonstrated the conversation down to this conversation level. By the way, if anybody doesn't know Henry Woodman,
reference.
You should. He's a brilliant man, and there's stories to be told about Henry in many environments around the world. But Henry is a remarkable man, and eventually he's been on the show before. And
Henry's out of prison. Oh my God! When did that happen?
His training order is still on, but I don't know anything else. But
no idea. Wow, that's good. He has good lawyers.
Yes, many stories about Henry. He's left his mark around the world.
And we also have Louis Boucher from
Louis Boucher.
Yes, from France.
Bon oui.
Yeah, well, actually, he's in Spain. He's from Spain right now, which makes it a late evening.
Oh, he may be in Spain now. But he has a wonderful site that you all need to get on Facebook. It is a Facebook group called Sleep Shot. And what you do is you take a picture of the person sitting next to you sleeping, and you keep your face in it. So he has some really tremendous.
This is what Road Warriors do. You do these bad things where it's like, subway shots of people that you never would see anywhere else. Or
yes, it is quite. Sleep Shot is fantastic. So.
I feel like we're talking around the family. It's like a family tree. It's like, okay, that's Uncle Louie.
The celebs are coming out during the holiday season. It's very, very nice. So.
All right, but I do want
to go back to Stuart's point. What Stuart said about make sure you have a model you can point to and that you can trust is important. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
If you don't have good enough, the point of analytics, the point of data, is to make better decisions. Fundamentally, that's what it's about. And if you don't have the data that enables you to make good decisions today, then anything you invest in that is a win because you're going to make better decisions as a plus, right? I want to be very clear. When we, the story I told, that is now almost 12 years ago, right? This is not last week by any stretch. The model wasn't perfect. It just allowed us to be smarter than our competition. Yeah. It's the old joke. I know I've told it on the show before about the two guys walking through the woods and the bear comes charging and the first guy puts on a pair of running shoes and the second guy says, "What are you doing? You'll never outrun that bear." And the first guy says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." That's what we're trying to do, right? Yeah. Your competition are the folks you're hiking through the woods with on this one, and you just need to make sure you have enough data that you're smarter than they are. It doesn't have to be perfect. Perfect will kill you dead in this business.
It's not possible at this point. Right, for sure. Exactly. When back in the day when I was a physicist, one of the things you learn when you're doing experimentation is the difference between precision and accuracy. Right? And things don't have to be precise in this world. They just have to be accurate enough to make decisions from. And accuracy to you is contextual based on your comfort level. But if you can't get to that point, then go find someone that can help you get to that point. If you and R about the specific details of getting precise, you will never find an attribution model that works because it's not possible. There's too many unknowns.
I agree with Louis' reaction of a physicist. I think we need to preface all of our stories with weird jobs we may or may not have had. So, I'm going to say back in the day when I was a belly dancer.
That's funny.
That's right. Lauren, before you won your first Nobel Prize, somewhere you probably have a good story.
I was a gravedigger at one point too. I'll throw that one in at some point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, one thing to point out of all this too is that I would add the caveat of the attribution conversation is that with the accuracy and everything else like this, that truly there is attribution theft because of service profiles that are out into market. Two, I wouldn't just blind faith follow one string of attribution interpretation. Verification, trust with verification. Look at what you're getting, but then try to find an alternative means of attribution to either verify or deny what it is you're looking at. Because the more data you have from different sources and the ability to oversee all of them is giving you the perspective that you need, not just blind faith. This is the true truth, and that's the only truth. So.
And actually, I have proposed. Now, I'm not sure if it will be accepted for the Focusrite Innovation edition. We always kind of come up with ideas and trends and things like that. And one of the things I proposed was to write an article on attribution theft to just kind of raise the bar for it. So if that winds up being approved, we may be able to collectively pull something together to demonstrate some of the things that are happening, which would probably be beneficial for the industry, and to give it a platform.
I would run it by your attorney before you call specific people out. But there are heinous, egregious cases right now where big brands in this industry are literally claiming credit for stuff they have no business claiming credit for.
And so we don't have to
deliberately ramming that down people's throats so they spend more money with them, and it's unethical. I mean, it should be illegal if it's not.
It should be illegal. Yeah. And there are unfortunately big players in the world that are doing that.
Yeah. I'm not going to do the thing I did in 2000, I think it was 2011, 2012, something like that, where I called out fake reviews and kind of said, here's how the sausage is made, and did that. That wound up in a T News, like 5-part summary. And it resulted in, at least for my hosting provider, the largest denial of service attack they had experienced in their history, trying to take down, because I was on a shared server, right? I didn't have a dedicated server at the point, which I then moved to. It took down 1,000 websites. People were quite upset about that.
Actually, we can infer to an industry type of fleet. We don't have to necessarily name company names, but anything that you add to your channel that is augmenting what your direct channel should be contributing for its own, and you try to augment that with their service profiles where they intercede with things, where they drop in pop-ups and so forth to try to enhance your direct channel contribution conversion, those are attribution theft models. Because
with the exception of Flip2, right?
Flip2 doesn't actually insert itself into it. They run parallel. Well, Flip2 is...
Oh, no, it does now. Right? Their Discover product is very much...
They're not on the show, so Ed's product is evil and cruel, No. But all those things that you put in put into it can in fact take it over your session counts and put themselves into their source rather than where it came from. So.
But doing an article like that, I think, would be very good to say, here's what's happening, here's how it's getting done, and then and I'm sure Ed's doing it the right way to say, and here's how it should be done, right? If you do it this way, and you should.
One of the things they do, and another vendor I'll call out as a positive that does this is the guest book, because both those vendors, Flip2 and the Guestbook, what they do is when they deploy their product on your website, and it does interfere with the original flow of the consumer, so it can potentially have a positive or negative impact. Both of them only deploy under the scenario of an A/B test. So you have your original flow as a control, and then they'll deploy at a small percentage and rake it. They'll go up, raise up as the certainty increases and the risk decreases. So if you have a vendor that just throws stuff on there and then says, here's the report and we made $1 bazillion for you, but they're not A/B testing it, you can't prove apples to apples against an A/B control, then you need to question that. At least be skeptical at looking at their data and verify it with your own third-party data.
Especially with tremendous hockey stick results where you aren't seeing the outcome in your actual
my revenue year over year is the same, and yet somehow you're now contributing 100% increase on online bookings. What happened here? I don't know.
Yeah, that has.
You were so lucky you signed up with them, because of all your business would have disappeared.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and if you're in doubt, try switching them on and off, like over the course of a few weeks. Like have them on for a week, off for a week, on for a week, and see what impact it has on your bottom line. If it's not having much of an impact, they're probably not doing a whole lot.
Yeah. So Lily, bring us back on track. Well, there was a couple other articles that are talking about inventory, the Airbnb article and so forth that Robert had dropped in and so forth. Anything else that struck your eye as to, that'd be an interesting one to make sure we don't miss.
Oh, yeah. And I was like,
am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Okay.
Yep.
I think really from my perspective, the Airbnb article that said where, Airbnb goes, hotels will follow. It just stabbed me in the heart a little bit there, because that's exactly what we see all the time. Hospitality is such a follower. It drives me a little bit crazy. I feel like we can't come up with our own ideas sometimes. But it's also interesting because I literally just was discussing being able to put some of the resort's activities on experiences with a client just yesterday about whether or not they can be listed on Airbnb experiences as a local activity to draw more people to their resort, which is a great kind of unique way to take advantage of that distribution channel so that even people who are staying in an Airbnb can come experience things at your resort, and hopefully you can kind of draw them in from there. But it's kind of a different way around it. I just would like to see somebody create something groundbreaking for hotels in this arena. I know that a lot of the OTAs are focused on experiences, but have we not learned anything? Do we really want OTAs to deliver this on our behalf? Can we not come up with a little bit more of it ourselves? So that was kind of what hit me.
It's so difficult because what should be leading it are a lot of the brands, right? The major brands could do, and they run into, it's kind of a self-inflicted challenge where they don't want to roll things out to, let's do a test in this one particular market, right?
And do it well,
Airbnb does a lot of it, and do it really well. Like we're going to go into Seattle and really knock this out, tell people to test, really figure it out. And then if that works, maybe we'll try it in Chicago or wherever. And Airbnb does that sort of thing very, very aggressively. They won't do it because all of a sudden they go, oh, well, we've got to get the brands involved and we've got to do this and we have to have the same thing everywhere. And then they start looking at the investment and the ROI and who's going to pay for it.
And they find out ways to make it easier and commoditized and watered down so that it is scalable and then it becomes not valuable to the consumer.
Yeah, 20 years, almost 20 years ago, when we were doing Neat Group and the dynamic packaging, one of the things was to really go out, especially when we were doing packaging on these hotel group websites, and we were doing it for leading hotels of the world, and we were doing it for Marriott and a bunch of others, was, and now you can start bundling in local activities. Is there a museum, right? Is there anything? The platform dealt with all that very, very easily, right? and that just wound up being, oh, it's so hard to go contract that stuff and put it in and find. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But if there's a value for that, or if you can tie to various groups that have access to, we were talking to Broadway theaters. They were all over it, right? But couldn't get the hotel groups in New York to really go, oh, this would be great. And you're like, my God, do a theater package where they can confirm their seats would be maybe a really good thing in a single transaction, and making sure everybody gets paid the right amount and it's all settled. And hey, guess what? They bought seats. Those aren't refundable. The hotel doesn't have to be refundable. That's probably good. They're going to book further in advance. All those good things that you really want. But still, so that was 2001. 18 years later, still not much of that happening. But everybody's heading that direction. They want to get there, and it is possible. But it takes strategy, effort, and technology. So.
Stuart's frustration. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it does, and we shouldn't necessarily look for everything to be easy either. I think that's not how we got here in the first place.
Yeah. So Kat and Lily, before you joined the show, the reputation I had was complaining every time Airbnb came up on the show. Like I hated it, and I think a lot of people looked at it as I hated Airbnb, and that is not the case. I think they're doing a great job at what they do. My issue has always been, drives me crazy, is exactly what is described in this headline, whereas the hospitality industry freaks out and tries to copy everything Airbnb does because they see success happening and they say, we need to recreate exactly what they're doing, and they lose sight of what makes hotels different than and the value proposition that a hotel has. Absolutely. Versus an Airbnb. And so we're looking, our focus is on the wrong thing because we're trying to follow and copy versus trying to innovate and differentiate. And so I like that the article kind of points that out. I think we're kind of doing it again right now with the experience stuff. I think experiences are important, but I think it depends on your property. It depends on your location. It depends on your customer. Like you don't have to be all things to all people all of the time. It's not tangible. You're not going to do it well. No. And so just focus on what you're good at, what makes you unique. If you're a quirky little property that has some quirky little experiences that you can tie to it, absolutely lean into that. But if if people are coming to you because there's a specific thing that everyone in that town goes to do, just focus on that one thing. Don't try to overcomplicate it.
Well, I mean, to add to it, and I agree, out of the spirit of the article, I think the article points out again, we've lost our way, as I was putting into the chat with we focus on the guest. As we've always made the distinction on the show that there's two types of hotel owners. There's the asset ownership, and then there's the hotelier, the one that actually runs it to be the business that it's intended to be. And the cool part is we're in a unique new world of opportunity. Gone is the old concierge desk. Gone is the prestige of worrying about the guest and the guest experience that stays with us. And as much as it used to be compared to now, we have more tools that we can utilize in it. Louis pointed out, the guest experience. There's lots of platforms that are trying to do this. Google's tried to do it. Facebook's even tried to do it. But if we go and look at the idea that we are more of an experience-driven traveler now, at least recognized compared to when we first started measuring it.
Are we? I would challenge that statement.
Okay. Yeah. I think we are in the sense compared to buying material things versus going to places to do it. There is maybe a tendency to go out and want to do things more so than it is to buy things.
I don't think we're as different as the media would have us believe we are.
No, I don't think it's as extreme into the circumstance, but I also think from when we first started looking at it, I think we were actually more travel driven before we started even measuring this. Back before we had larger data sets, back when you still had keys hanging on a wall that opened a door in a room at a hotel. Back in those days, we used to go to the same place every year generationally because that's where you went for vacation. During those days, I think the experience driven was higher than even it is now. But I think there is a difference between the wake up that happened in 2008 where people realized that material possession aspect was not the true value proposition of life compared to traveling to someplace. I think that there is more to it now than there was then.
But I would also say there's data that would suggest in certain markets, especially lower income markets, because of the economy and consumer confidence, when you look at the average dollar being spent outside of the accommodations on leisure travel for vacationers, like family vacationers, they're spending less than they used to on restaurants, on attractions, on things like that. And I don't necessarily
that's in the home. That's in the home economy circuit. I agree with you on that because people are not. They have the bigger TV at home. They have less money to spend to go out in their local market. But they still do the travel. They'll put themselves in debt.
I think people do, right? They value experiences, no question. I think they always have. But I think there's this misnomer, in my opinion, that people are saying that the experience outside of the hotel is the silver bullet that's going to magically save the hotel industry. Not that it really needs saving. And so everyone's investing so much money in trying to figure out how to package tickets and how to do these excursions when they're not investing in what they should be, which is the product itself and the customer, the guest experience when it's so through staff training and things like that. If you're a hotel and you have a choice to go figure out partnerships with local attractions, or you can spend that money making your staff better equipped to handle the challenges that your property already faces, do that, because that's going to have a better impact on your bottom line.
I agree with that. And that's what I'm trying to say is that I think at this point, with two things. One is I still believe that that if people have the choice of buying something versus traveling, they're going to want to do the travel, and they'll put themselves in debt to do so compared to putting themselves in debt not to. The other is that from a perspective of how Google and what's happening with search results and so forth, that our content relevance in our websites is beyond just address and rate and dates and pictures of rooms, that we can become authorities on aspects of our hotel and its value proposition in our market more so than we've ever had before, and actually begin to show relevance for ourselves that we used to be dominated by more money being spent by the larger players, the OTAs and so forth, that could overshadow what we did simply by just piling money on it. I'm not saying that's gone away, but I think we have more of an opportunity now to show up for more experience-driven content related to our hotel than we used to have before, which was more about strategic identity of our product.
No, I agree with that 100%. I just don't think we need to get carried away with trying to make this magical package of all the whole itinerary of someone's stay. I don't think most consumers want that. I think they want to be informed, and they want us to reduce friction in their decision making and make it easier for them. But I don't think they want one entity to be in control of that in to create some kind of fixed itinerary, which is what a lot of people are trying to accomplish. I don't think that's going to be helpful for most hotels.
The airlines with one order, though, are definitely going to try to fit that role, though.
Sure.
To be, you flew on a plane, good. Bolt in everything you're doing onto your itinerary, especially because it's a leading indicator of intent, right?
For sure.
So kind of bringing it back to the original point that I had made on the article itself, I guess for me experiences are definitely a great and an emerging thing. But for me, I don't even know that it's the experience itself that I'm so worried about hoteliers creating. It's the fact that Airbnb already tapped into this and we didn't identify it sooner. So really, my takeaway from the whole thing is to put some creative thinking into your strategy. Don't just try and see, okay, what are other people doing that I want to follow? See if you can't break out and create something of your own, become the trendsetter rather than the follower. And I would love to see more of that happening in hospitality.
Yeah, and there's an easy way to accomplish that, right? You have conversations with the guests that are already staying with you and find out what it is they're doing while they're there and what they're enjoying. And what are those? Find these golden nuggets, these little gems of experiences that are going to have a positive impact, and then create the content on your website, and then train your staff to educate people when they check in. Hey, where are you going to eat tonight? Did you know this little Italian restaurant just around the corner gets rave reviews from our guests? And a lot of people say they like the tiramisu. Be personalized, but you don't have to overcomplicate it. It's just about getting the right kind of information, authentic information, and then sharing that with your guests in an authentic way that genuinely is there to provide value to them. That's the way to do it.
Because otherwise, they're going to go up to their room, they're going to order the food through Grubhub, and have the person come up and deliver it, and that's going to be it, right? They're going to have a lesser experience. You aren't going to, be involved at all. And, So.
I literally just did that the other day. I ordered through Uber Eats from Dunkin' Donuts because the coffee in the hotel was so bad. So also get great coffee and then people won't order out.
It doesn't even have to be great coffee. It just has
decent.
to be decent coffee. Yeah.
Tastes like I'm drinking sludge.
Jump in. Oddly enough, that's another topic we were looking at for our convention this year is third-party food options and then partnering with local restaurants and how that can assist your revenue. I actually have to step out, so I just want to interject with that. It was great being on the panel again. I took a lot of great notes. Each time I have this opportunity with you all, it's like a brainstorming session for different things I can focus on. So once again, don't be surprised if we get some emails from me. And Tim left, but I loved his. He had said, "Make the recession your competitor's problem," which is a really catchy sounding title. So I actually might turn that.
Tim has lots of.
Tim is the most tweetable human being that I've ever met in my life. He is full of these little quips and platitudes for sure.
Well, that's fantastic. So thank you all, and I'm sorry I can't stay much longer, but I look forward to the next opportunity to be alongside you.
And
thanks, Kat.
And because Kat's leaving, there's no. Why would I want to stick around with the rest of you guys? I'm going to leave too. So
Lauren,
no, I've got to go.
Audio.
Aside from Lily, that has made me. I'm now torn on this decision, of course, of leaving. Learn and say why, but no, I've got to go. I've got to go too. I've got a call. So have a great.
So since Lauren has no audio, Robert, if people want to find you, where can they do so?
That's right. Robert K. Cole on social media or rockcheetah.com.
And Kat, you're going to find you.
You can find me at kat.m.speaks@gmail.com. Or if you're in the AHOA world, you can reach out to me at Katija@ahoa.com.
Did you get the pronunciation of that, Lauren?
No, it just not going to help me, Robert.
Katija.
Yeah.
I would like to say I started the call with pronouncing her name
Yeah,
correctly.
you did it perfect.
You did a very. I just want to hear Lauren try. It's so entertaining.
Kat is Kat.
Okay.
Like, my entire existence this has occurred, right? And mind you, the American language has words such as onomatopoeia, Mississippi, that have more syllables than my name.
Well, no, Lauren, we've worked on 228 shows to try to get Lauren to be beyond monosyllabic. That's it. We can get a couple additional,
I butchered so many names. Honest to gosh, I do.
I'm just glad he's eliminated the Uggs and buy a bad and stuff like that from his vocabulary.
Exactly. Yeah. That was a little off-putting in the first episode.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Happiest of holidays. Thank you so much for joining us again, and look forward to having you back on the show whenever. Obviously you're one of the permanent co-hosts, so hopefully we'll see you, if not next week, the week after, what have you, and hope you have a wonderful holiday time. And Robert, the same for your family, because they deserve it. They have to put up with you, right?
And we're all going to be together over the weekend. It's going to be great. So.
Nice.
That's going to be awesome.
Oh, and hey, I didn't even say it. My younger daughter has been accepted for a doctorate of occupational therapy program.
Whoa!
So we are quite excited. That is the best. News there. So.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah.
Especially if you're getting so old, you're going to need more, care from the family.
Exactly. That's exactly why we're so excited about her going to this field. Yeah, but she won't let us say the school because she's still pending. She has one more interview, but she knows she's in one. But she's just kind of going to make sure. See if she gets the best of the picks. So anyway, but that's exciting. So got to run. See you guys.
All right. Bye, Robert. Bye, Kat. Bye, Kat. Thank you.
And one last, just special thank you to Lily and Stuart for throwing together the webinar they did yesterday. It's called Boost Revenue and Gain Loyal Guests with Hotel Gift Cards, a spinoff from the topic that we had discussed when I was on the session a few weeks back. So just goes to show if anybody on the show would like more information, that will be available on the AHOA website for AHOA members. But reach out to us if you're interested and sign up.
Send me that link, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well, so that when they do the playback, we'll have it in here too. So
cool, great idea. Well, thanks. So thanks everybody. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you on the next go round.
Excellent.
All right.
Bye, Kat.
Bye.
Well,
yeah, we go. So full disclaimer, we've got to be careful what we say on this show, because apparently sometimes when we talk off the cuff, people assume that we're experts on the subject we're talking about when we really aren't and have no clue. So Kat reached out to Lily and me after the show and said, hey, would you do this webinar? And I'm like, I don't know a whole lot about it, but we sure can make it up as we go along. And speaking of making it up as we go along, look who showed up.
Look who shows up making up as we go along. Oh, no audio. Nope, no audio yet. See, we lose 2 game 1. Where does that come? I mean, all of a sudden Ed just pops
but
up.
it's a big downgrade. It's a massive downgrade.
You came out completely ahead.
I don't know, man. If we had a trade option and I could trade Kat and Robert for you,
I don't know, Ed, if you would be on the winning side of that. Hello, Mr. Edward StOnge. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Louis says that you have perfect timing, which is true. It's been a good Friday. We've had a lot of fun conversations.
Oh, look at Louis.
Louis needs to join the show.
Yeah, Louis, come on, man.
He's contributing through the text. He needs to.
And Holly's been sitting into the peanut gallery as well.
We need to get Louis to share the link on this show to his sleep shot community.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Put it in there. Yeah. Sorry. But also, you know who else has another good one is Jim Zito does, because he lives in New York again. He does subway shots.
Oh, does he?
Absolutely hilarious. I mean, he throws some of them that just you're sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's only New York, man."
So I do have to ask Louis, because I haven't seen it on his social. Has he gotten his Tesla yet? I mean, he did like a GoFundMe. He did this whole big campaign about getting a Tesla.
I don't know. Ex-Prime Minister.
He's writing.
Anyway, so
sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Not really, but I figured
sorry,
I'd
not sorry.
Yeah.
Some things that we still haven't hit on. We obviously with the Rutro is one of them we haven't hit. But I want to bring up just a question, just out of the field. It's not on the list for it. We did talk. Actually, thank you, Mr. Stuart. You kept me company when I drove up to Orlando to see Ed, because I got caught up on all the podcasts. Which it was a great chance to pick up on. Which, if people don't know, Mr. Stuart runs an award-winning podcast called Fuel Travel Podcast.
Hotel marketing podcast. Get it straight, Lauren.
Come on, Lauren.
Fuel marketing. It's enough. You don't show up for that, but you show up for fuel travel. But anyway, so it's actually a phenomenal podcast and very usable information. And you brought up the what happened with Netflix, and we didn't bring it up on the show when we had the week to do that, because we went off on some tangent somewhere. Oh no, we were doing Convergence. No, we didn't go off on tangent. We're actually just doing the Convergence show. But I have a question about it. It's like, if anything, it pointed out to me about was that people are watching. They don't participate as much until something like this comes along. But there is this huge, I wouldn't say dormant, but largely unengaged audience that's out there, because many times we look at Twitter as being not a dead platform, but almost useless to the use platform. It's a huge fire hose of stuff. Well, and unless you begin to be good about finding what you're interested in, it's really just an overwhelming amount of jabber.
There's a lot of noise on Twitter, for sure. Yeah, but I would. So I keep disagreeing with you today, and I hate that, Lauren, because usually
I'm good. I love to disagree.
Right? So for me, most hotels listen to this. Twitter is not a platform you should put a whole lot of emphasis on. Certainly not if you're strapped for time. If you got infinite time, then certainly, right? There's a lot of things you should be doing before you even think about Twitter, because it's a very unique ecosystem. And yes, there's a lot of people pay attention to it. But I would say with the Netflix thing specifically, what Netflix did, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, Netflix put out jumping on a meme that had been going on about what would you say during sex that you would also say on your brand Twitter account. So they were appealing to a specific group of people, a bunch of nerdy social media people that are posting stuff and trying to come up with content for their brands, and typically are very creative and have a good sense of humor. And Twitter's a great platform for that. So people went all out, and every major brand in the world pretty much joined in this massive conversation. But I would say it wasn't that people were watching Twitter that it got so much attention. that ecosystem paid attention, right? Because it resonated with them. It was a good message for them and the right tone for them. But what happened was news outlets, mainstream news outlets, started repeating what was going on and clipping the best of and making these top 10 lists and stuff like that. So that's where most people ended up seeing this article or this content was through articles that were written on channels they were already reading. The majority of people don't sit there and look at Twitter streams and what's trending on Twitter. A lot of people do. A lot of nerdy people that are in marketing do, but the average consumer, I don't think, is on Twitter unless they see it on a channel that is reporting on it, which is what happened in this case.
Well, like you pointed
Unless
out,
they feel like they want to have a direct personal relationship with President Trump, of course.
Yeah, unless they have political opinions. Yes.
Well,
Yeah, but you also
my
pointed out on
favorite
the
thing
show-
to use Twitter for is when you hear rumor of something going on and you want to see if it's happening or not. And you can just go and search Twitter, and anyone who's tweeting about it, you'll be
Just
able to kind of
chatter,
piece
right?
together if things are happening. The challenge I've always thought with Twitter is I actually think it's an indispensable part of the internet. The problem is it just hasn't turned into something that's super commercially interesting. And I think that's a big challenge on it, because quite honestly, for news, if you want super real-time understanding of things going on, Twitter is amazing for that. If you know what you're looking for, you can find all sorts of, real-time understanding.
Yeah, if there's a major event going on, Twitter's definitely the real-time way to get your finger on the pulse. But it's never going to be that as a source for mainstream consumers, right? Because it requires a certain skill to be able to decipher what's really going on, to sort out the signal from the noise. One of the things, example this week, when the premiere of Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker occurred earlier this week.
Oh, I didn't realize that happened.
Yeah, that's the thing. Apparently, it's a small independent movie that just came out. But Twitter was the place I went first to really gauge the reaction, because there started to be a lot of critics coming out and making noise about this is not a great movie. But if you looked at the chatter on Twitter from average people, it was a very different tone. So that's an example of where you can, from an event that's happening, get a finger on a pulse of what's really happening.
Or if you want to tap into a passionate group of people that are on Twitter to interact with each other.
Yeah, for sure.
So I will
community, right,
say,
or a tribe, for sure.
Like I'm part of a tribe of college football trolls, and Twitter is amazing for that. And there's actually a hotel here in Orlando that's done a pretty good job with it. Their GM is a fan of the group, and actually this hotel has done a pretty good job. Not a lot of volume, so they're not spending a lot of time on it, but when they are popping in and saying something, it's something meaningful, and it's something real. It's usually a picture of the GM rocking his team, at the hotel. But
it has to be authentic, right? You can't
that's
just,
the thing.
You can't
If it wasn't
create
authentic,
that.
you'd get destroyed.
If they didn't have that guy and they tried to do it, it would backfire so fast. The internet is cruel and relentless when you when you
and
make
especially on Twitter.
I don't think we actually, because I agree with you on it, in the sense that I'm not. Twitter to me is like a big message board, and you can choose what part of it you want to look at any given time. It's the one place that everybody can go as a standard if they want to go look for things. What I'm saying from the perspective is that how they found it is not the critical element. I mean, it's critical in the sense of using it if you want to duplicate it. But where news outlets picked it up or where geekheads picked it up, I think you made an excellent point. It wouldn't have worked on Facebook on your podcast. It wouldn't have worked on Facebook, and it wouldn't work. What was the big thing you pointed out was these were brand people that jumped on, brands that had nothing to do with other brands that jumped on. You talk about getting a very specific slice of engagement, and it didn't get started that way, but it got picked up that way because then it was almost a challenge, challenge thrown as to how can you be able to say this, without defaming your brand, national, international brand, but still contribute to it. And it was genius, some of the way that these companies were doing this. And it was even genius when they did it falteringly and somebody did it better than they did when they corrected.
That was the best.
Well, that was the bad stuff was the normal people following the thread who were chiming in when a brand would say what theirs was, and they would come in and say what it really should have been.
Right.
Yeah, there was some really good. The creativity of the audience was probably better than the.
The worst one though was Hulu. They should have just abstained because they did it. They did it so wrong.
They did.
But that actually brought attention to him because look at, and you pointed out again in your podcast, it wasn't just the string itself, but it was the reshares of the contributions as well. Mm-hmm. What was being contributed into it was being reshared massively for those brands. So not only did Netflix get the value being shared in it with all of that, but each of the brands, as in their participation, also got shared in with that process. Mm-hmm. So, it's a very unique combination of things that happened with that, which hadn't happened in a while.
It was, and it was really lightning in a bottle in a lot of ways. But I think one of the things, and I think we pointed this out on the show, is that people like the edginess of that, but it went to the line without crossing the line, right? Yeah. It could have gotten vulgar, it could have gotten obscene, and I think a few people probably crossed the line, but Netflix never did, and most people stayed within that kind of safe zone of butting right up against what makes people a little uncomfortable. Yeah. Most people are grown-ups about it, but there was a big potential you could have offended a lot of people in this.
It actually turned into being an intelligent way of being snarky, where rather than just go to the dirt and be crude about it. You're absolutely right, and that's what made it so enjoyable was the creative way of the innuendo without it being the blatant. And I think that was a lot of fun to see people get as smart as they could about it. Which is what I'm trying to say is it was a nice discovery to see. Yeah. It was that these audiences are out there that aren't just the constant trolls and the back and forth garbage things. That there is an intelligent, watchful community that is willing to participate when the stakes are correct. And I thought that was neat and a neat revelation to that process. Because as I'm saying, with Twitter, it's not my first go-to. I use it very sparingly to only specific things when I know that there's a message to be made. It's usually an immediate message that I would have to use it for.
Yeah. It's great for discovery, and it's great for answering questions or going to a community of experts on a topic. And if you want to find out if you just bought an email list and you should spam it or not, or if you want to find out if you should cloak content on your website, and Ed knows what I'm talking about, then Twitter's a good place you can go publicly ask that question somewhat anonymously and get real answers.
It's never anonymous. Just know that.
Relatively anonymously. But you can get unbiased search engines. It's a good sanity check for you to see if you're thinking in a way that people are going to be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that, or whatever the question is. You can usually find a tribe on Twitter that's going to be able to answer the question.
Just don't make it your only data source.
Yeah, Louis popping in about asking about Instagram, and I have to say that Instagram for me is still personally a bit of a challenge to understand my value personally. With the business wise, I'm all over it, but from a personal point of view, I'm still very selective about how I engage on that platform.
I would you're over 40, Lauren.
Yeah, I would say that's an age difference. Like I have an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old. My 11-year-old doesn't have internet stuff yet, like social media, but my 13-year-old, all his friends, that's the channel that they all use to communicate, was Instagram.
Yeah, Louis agreeing with you.
It's honestly because, Lauren, your meme game isn't that strong.
I have no meme game.
I feel like you should hire somebody specifically to listen through these shows and create memes out of them with random screen grabs of our face or, Stuart.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I have no meme game. I have never gotten into the ability
Speaking of that, that reminded me of the great image capture I got of Tim Peter all the way back in the beginning.
Oh my gosh,
Speaking of way back in the beginning, unless we have more comments on social media, I actually, there was an article that popped up right after we began today, and it touches on an article we talked about a while ago, so I'm just going to drop this in. It's a very, very ugly link to there. But essentially, amidst all of the impeachment things, the Senate also reauthorized the Brand USA funding through 2027. So I think that was a really bright, shining moment before the end of the year to have happen. So that's not expiring. And I know that we talked a lot about destination marketing maybe about 5 weeks back or so. So it's good to see that did go forward.
Yeah, a lot of people breathing a big sigh of relief today, for sure.
Listen, because don't forget, in that original article was when we also just quietly found out that Pure Michigan was defunded.
Right.
which was seen as one of the most successful DMOs in the marketing space, got completely eaten alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now Visit Florida. They're still
They're funded. They're much smaller than they had.
I thought they did a huge purge.
Yeah. Yeah, they had to. And, they lost some of their capabilities, I would say is definitely an issue. But I have a feeling that I think Ron DeSantis is probably going to fix that on the next go round. The problem is this all frothed up right as he was coming in to office, and he has very much seemed like the type of guy that doesn't want to just do something. So he kind of kicked the can, kept them alive, didn't completely destroy them, but definitely didn't keep them at the level that they were.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's not like Florida as a state is hurting, because there's a lot of money in DMO marketing in the state at the local level.
But you gotta understand though, is like who Visit Florida is helping are the much smaller areas where their DMOs maybe have a $700,000 budget, and that was actually the irony of the Visit Florida drama. The politicians who were attacking Visit Florida, their constituency was the constituency that would be hurt the worst by Visit Florida going away, because a lot of people don't understand, like Visit Orlando, Visit St. Pete, Visit Palm Beaches, none of them partake in Visit Florida because of the rules of what you have to go through to get involved with them, because they're private, public-private entities, and they don't want to be audited and all of that stuff. So, Orlando is going to get its 60-something million, 70-something million visitors, whether or not Visit Florida exists.
Sure.
But Appalachia County, who has really good hiking and, nature, and they're the ones who hurt. West Volusia County, who is home of Cassadaga, which is the where all the psychics have decided to settle. They're going to have a hard time telling people about that. So,
they could use telepathy.
I was going to say, are they really? Aren't they already telling us now?
Well, I mean, they were ready for it because they saw it coming.
Okay, that's just bad.
That's funny.
Yes. So anyways, but those are the ones who hurt. So like in pure Michigan, who it's going to hurt are going to be the lesser known destinations inside of Michigan. The big draws are going to go forward as if nothing's happened. And that's the challenge when you're talking about just cutting a DMO is, sure, when you look at it, a lot of the DMO world lives in a space that's hard to defend. And some of that's because the vendor space and the DMO space is not doing the DMO vendors any favors. They're in a space that's been disrupted multiple times over the last 8 years. Their models have completely changed because the rug keeps getting pulled out under them. You want to talk about an entity in the travel space that got eaten by TripAdvisor. It is the DMOs, because most DMOs go back before TripAdvisor. They were gigantic sources of information for an area, and they would send you out a destination guide, and that was their primary source of their purpose, and they actually drove benefit. TripAdvisor completely destroyed the need for that. So they lost that. Google has been encroaching a ton on them, which is making them hard to survive, as a lot of them had gone to this model of basically being an agency of scale. We have a big enough budget that we can buy effectively, more effectively than the individuals buying. But Google's kind of putting an end to that too. So they're in flux. At the same time, they're under immense political attack. And a lot of that has to do with, the average taxpayer doesn't understand you're not actually paying tax to that DMO. Just because you live in that area, none of your money goes to them. But yet somehow you get to vote on politicians that have control over them. And that's kind of a strange dynamic when you look at it, because a lot of people here in Florida don't understand that our tax base is so low, especially in Central Florida, because the tourism tax pays for a lot here, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Louis pointed out that Europe is different in scale. I don't know about whether they're necessarily behind per se, as he points out, but that they're not in the same categories of how we look at what we're doing. And probably in some ways it might even be better considering that they don't have these things that are guiding these politics of monies. Speaking of Expedia, there is one article that was thrown in by Robert as to the rallying of the troops and the don't worry, remain calm, nothing's going wrong.
Everything's fine as they sit with their coffee with the fire going on.
Yeah. It's December. We want to wish you
with their list of employees and a pencil. Who's going?
Yeah.
I think smart money's on some major layoffs in January for Expedia.
Yeah, there's going to be. They say they're not changing the roadmap. They said they're not going to do they're supporting the reorg that just happened, and they're not just looking to replace the seats, but how are they going to exist as they're doing it if they're not doing it well right now? So that something's got to change.
Would they lose 22% in their valuation in the last quarter? It's there's going to be some big changes coming for sure.
If I was Expedia, I'd be working aggressively to developing a property management system.
And or a funding model for
Lily, you're
people
muted.
to buy hotels.
We can't hear you.
That's better.
There we go.
I always wondered if they would do that, especially for the smaller kind of boutique-y properties that maybe can't afford a great marketing system. If they're like, hey guys, we can step in and just handle everything electronic for you. You don't even really have a booking engine anymore. It just takes you to Expedia. I'm sure there would be some skepticism about whether or not it would display alternatives if they were sold out or something like that. But I always thought that would be actually a really smart business model for small hotels.
Even to that point of that worry of if you're sold out, would it show alternatives? I mean, would it matter to you as a hotel if you got a cut?
I think that it could, because if they show alternatives, then the guest isn't as likely to try adjusting their dates. They're more likely to go stay with your competitor, whereas you may be dealing with guests who have flexible dates. But to Lewis's point, as he's saying in the chat box, I don't think that they will. They can't afford to change direction. I do agree. I don't think it's likely, but I do think it could be a relatively easy business model for them. The other thing that would be a great business model for Expedia is just charging for intel. Do you know how much intel they have?
Their data is amazing.
That they never publish.
Yeah.
If they could create pay-to-play reporting for hotels the way that Star does,
and DMOs too.
it would make so much money, and it's already at their disposal.
And they've tried to kind of bubble some of the insight up through things like Rev Plus and some of these tools, but it didn't really get widely adopted because it was limited in scale. But I think they definitely have some insight that no one else has that could be monetized. I don't think that's enough to save them, though. Yeah.
What I want to know for a lot of my destination hotels, you know how they have that thing in Rev Plus that'll say who else are they looking for, but it's who else are they looking for in this location search. I want to know broadly each customer, like what other destinations are they looking at? Are we competing with, Lake Tahoe plus Napa plus Orlando? Are those the choices people are making? And they are in a unique position to have this kind of customer information that they could do all sorts of, essentially DMO comp set suggestions. And that would help the destination properties as well.
Yeah, Louis makes a good point. So Louis, if you don't remember, was at Expedia for quite some time, and he's calling out the fact that their database is a mess.
Aren't they all? And data cleanliness across the board.
Louis, just so you know, if you want to, we can just turn on your mic. If you say you're shy, you don't want the camera on, we can just kick your mic on if you want to add to the conversation on this, because as you point out, you know him. Is that a yep or nope?
We're looking. Yep. So turn his mic on.
All right, Louis.
Let Louis in.
Let Louis in. There we go. All right, Louis, you should see that you can turn on your mic if you want to. There he is.
There he is.
Hi, Louis. Are you talking?
Oh man, nothing ever goes smoothly with us.
Technology.
No, he's on. It's on. It's all on. There's a green marker, and
you know, I think that yup might have actually been related to me suggesting data cleanliness, and he's probably scrambling and hiding.
And now he's like, ah, crap.
Not coming across.
Ah, crap.
We'll leave it on, Louis. If you can find a microphone. Nope, he muted himself. Oh, he's back on again.
I don't know what's happening here. What's new?
Input device.
Hey, technology is technology. I guess in strange way too is like, we had the conversation about Amazon coming to market. It's like, do we really want them to come to market? We say that we want them to come to market. 46% of the people say that they would leave their preferred method right now of booking and go to Amazon if Amazon came to market. And then we had that whole discussion is like, they're probably more of an influencer by not getting into the market because we always feel like they're looking over our shoulder. With what Google's doing and so forth, I think there's a legitimacy to your conversation of saying that if Expedia came in with a booking engine, that they would build something, but
they're just not going to go in that direction. It's
the booking engine is not the solution.
The margins aren't there. They're used to high margin, low cost product.
Yep. But this is where I'm saying they are technically advanced enough. I think they should build a property management system and go. Because here's what I'm saying. You say you don't, but have you looked at Amadeus's earnings?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a way to grow for sure, but it's such a major strategic pivot.
I mean, Amadeus is billions a quarter, very profitable. They have been able to shift. I mean, do you guys all remember what Amadeus was before? I mean, they weren't always an interesting company. Yeah.
I think they're not going to. Expedia would struggle to get scale like Amadeus has, given who they are, unless they going to do it through M&A, right? If they go and build one internally and try to acquire clients,
but Expedia's done a great job with M&A.
Uphill battle. Yeah, but if they went and bought a bunch of these major, like consolidated some of the bigger or medium-sized PMSs, maybe they could get the consumer.
I bet Oracle would be happy to part with Micros. I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Opera would cost to buy, but that would be one fell swoop. You get 50,000 properties on your platform, right? One fell swoop.
And I bet you Oracle would be like, here, it's yours. No takebacks. I don't want this problem anymore. Get me out of this industry. But I mean, like Springer Miller, you could pick them up. You could pick up Oracle.
A lot of those have rolled up already. Like Springer Miller's owned by Jonas, who also owns MSI, right?
Jonas is a multi-billion dollars national. Would be happy to make the multiple on their investment a realization for their investors.
No, Jonas doesn't flip companies. They're one of the few venture capital companies that sits on them and tries to use the growth and the profits of the other ones. They've never sold a company they've acquired. So I would
just say that I would love for something to change in the market because there's nobody that is doing this well.
Well, there's over 700 PMS companies in the industry. Over 700. In adding one more is not going to solve the problem.
Yeah. No. I just wish there would be some kind of cleanup functionality capability because it's nothing works correctly with everything else. Everything's trying to be harbored by the person that's creating it to see if they can go to scale, and it's just such a dysfunctional. Oh, okay, Louis, sorry about that. Yeah, see, it wasn't me, Ed. It was Louis' mic wasn't working.
I said we. I didn't say Lauren.
I think Louis muted his mic purposely to create some issues.
Anyways, so
hey guys, I got to run. I got to go.
Yeah, just while you're here, do you have time for the railroad?
Sure, let's roll real quick.
Uber works to app expands work where you get to go over and now you can drive a car and clean a bathroom.
I'm not sure this was ever on my list of things that I wished an Uber driver could do. I literally needed somebody to take something from my house to another point, and I thought, that would be interesting. More of
a courier.
Yeah.
They're already doing it with food, so why can't they do it?
And there's other services that already do tasks where you can send someone to pick up whatever,
There's already platforms for this. And plus, also, they have a bit of an image issue where they're still fighting about the security of their Uber drivers. Now you're going to invite them in to do housekeeping?
And laundry? Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry. And babysitting. Why not?
Well,
Babysitting.
they're saying laundry, but it's tongue in cheek. It's money laundry.
Yeah,
That's
this
funny.
seems like
Now,
a very-
Uber has to
I
make
feel
a
like
profit
they're
before they
losing
can money
focus
launder.
a little. Yeah, I think that they need to focus on their business lines and make a profit with those. I don't think that going into housekeeping services is. It just feels very
Listen,
fragmented to me.
Uber
It seems
is
like a
haunted.
panic to me.
Uber is haunted by the problem I've always said they've had, which is their whole thing was, hey, with scale, we'll just own consumers and we'll be able to move into places. And I always said, Amazon and Google already have that. So as soon as Uber gets into something that's worthwhile, Amazon and Google will just get in it and keep their users. They're not, Uber's not going to take Amazon and Google's users because first of all, Amazon and Google, albeit aren't saints, they've not been as evil as Uber. And
I don't think that this is too much different than when Amazon decided that it was going to overtake Apple and Samsung on the phone market.
Right.
And we all know how that worked out.
Yeah. Hey, before you go, Stuart, other than telling about your awesome award-winning podcast and so forth, you are on the marketing board for HSMAI, and coming up in January, you have a small little event, a little soiree.
Oh, yeah. We have an amazing, probably the best industry conference in the world is in New York at the Marriott Marquis at the end of January. If you go to hsmai.org, you can register for that. You've missed the early bird, and I don't know if I'm allowed to do this on the show, but I'm going to do it and beg forgiveness. But I asked them if we could get a fuel promo code to when we promote it on the podcast. So if you go and register today with the promo code Fuel 2020, then you'll get $50 off your registration. So
cool.
Yeah. So go do that. It's great. And I've been telling everyone, right? The content of this is great. The networking is phenomenal. It's a really, really good conference. But the biggest, most important thing about this conference and the really where the ROI is you get a big hug from Lauren.
I was going to say Lauren hugs. I knew
Lauren
that was coming.
Gray's hugs are the best. And when you're a 6'2" person like I am, and a little over 200 pounds, there's not many people can make you feel warm and cozy like Lauren Gray can. So I look forward to that. It's the highlight of my year. And even if the content sucked, I would still go for a hug from Lauren Gray. So
well, thank you so very much. And we are covering it live. We are going to be sitting outside the doors. And as
videotaping every hug as it happens.
Yeah. And I'll also say, too, HSMAI is trying to do a really good job of turning this into more of an event. And we're looking at a lot of things, like does it stay in New York next year? Does it change location? But we're trying to make it more than just here's the conference, because it backs up to the Adrian Awards already. So the Adrian Awards Gala is the night before. So if you're attending that, it's a wonderful experience. And then the conference is the next day. But they also have a resort breakout roundtable thing the day before. They have a CMO breakout the next day. And they're trying to look at more things to add to that entire experience. So trying to make it more of a hospitality marketing week. So definitely something you should get involved in if you're not involved in HSMAI. Oh, and Holly should be plugging this if she's still on the chat too. There's also a CHDM prep course the day before that Holly runs as well. So if you're interested in getting your CHDM, but it's a little intimidating reading through those bazillion pages of lots of content, then Holly does a really good job breaking that down. It's like a 4-hour session, and you can actually go on and take your CHDM right after that course with some other folks as well if you want to.
And like Stuart said, I mean, he kind of undersold it. This is bigger than Fashion Week in New York.
No, way bigger.
Way bigger.
And if Robert was on, he'd also point out the fact that it's also Broadway week where you get like 50% off Broadway tickets.
Yeah, he's made it a family affair when he comes to
that same week.
Right.
So it's the price of hotels is dirt cheap this time of year because it's really cold in New York. But if you want to go and enjoy the sights of New York, this is a really good week to do it. You get cheaper hotels, cheaper Broadway tickets, and you get a hug from Lauren to warm up your heart. No end. So
it's a full circle thing.
Yeah.
The other thing with Holly, her and Dan, I think they just announced it last week, but they're offering a 6-week series on basically they're following the instructional guide for the certification as a syllabus for introducing people to digital marketing for hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts, I think, in February. and it's an every other week for I think I don't know the exact
6 weeks. Yeah, and it's live, so it's very interactive, and I think and it's really intended for anyone. So if you're in revenue management or sales and you want to learn a little bit more about the marketing side, which you should absolutely, because as Lily keeps saying, we should all work together in one big happy family. This is a great course for anyone that's really just looking to sharpen their marketing skills a little bit.
Yep.
I will be there myself as well, so I'm looking forward. I've actually had a hug from Lauren before, and yet I am like 3 times more excited for the next one based on all of the publicity that it's been receiving over the past few weeks.
Well, it was Stuart. I tend to pick him up. I think this is where it all came from. Is like it is rare that big guys get to pick up big guys, but when I see Stuart, I like a big hug and just pick him up and spin him around. So he's not used to that.
I kick my foot back up. It's very romantic.
It's all good stuff. All good stuff.
You're missing out in life.
Ed had to leave us, but just to make sure that we Edward StOnge with Flip2, you can reach out to Flip2. For those who aren't familiar with Flip2, excellent platform. We can talk more about it another time, but don't miss out on the opportunity. The Flip2 is a very good resource if you're running your own hotel's website. With that in mind, Stuart, since you had to jump off sooner and I kept dragging you into more conversations, a little bit more about Fuel Travel and your amazing podcast and your services.
Yeah, so Fuel Travel, you can find out everything about our amazing booking engine, mobile app, and CRM at fueltravel.com. You can learn a lot about bees and beer and hotel marketing occasionally at fueltravel.com/podcast. That's where the podcast is. I will be at the HSMAI conference in January as well. So I will be receiving hugs if anyone wants to give them. Check out fueltravel.com. That's the mothership. And go see Rise of Skywalker in movie theaters this weekend because it is really, really good. And awesome. Don't listen to the critics. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, critics are people anyway. Lily, for those who want to know more about you, you actually have 2 platforms that you work from that you have companies for, but please detail about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. We do task force and day-to-day revenue management assistance via Total Customized Revenue Management, which most people know as TCRM. And we also have now Think Up Enterprises, which is our rebranded division where we focus on consulting, training, speaking opportunities, technology selection, technology auditing, etc. Actually, I will be missing one of our shows upcoming on the 3rd of January, the first one of the year, which is a bummer, but I'll be doing that because we're doing a hotel conversion. So those are the types of things we do under Think Up Enterprises as well.
Well, we always have the thing, first rule of Fight Club is that clients should never get in the way of the show. So, you're already breaking the rules.
I have a feeling there's going to be a few long days immediately post-conversion.
Yeah, unfortunately, those pesky clients get in the way. Well, again, thank you, everyone. Louis, thank you so much for chiming in on all you did in the chat. Sorry we couldn't get you on the audio or in the video, but you're always more than welcome. And everyone that joined us today, you can always chime in and join us in the conversation should you want to outside of the chat room. You can always do it in the chat as well. And for everyone else on the other platforms, thank you for watching us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube on a variety of channels. And with that in mind, if you would like to replay this show, we're going to, of course, it's simulcasted now, but we'll be recasting it for our Asian timetable on Sydney on Wednesday, 11:30, and our EU companions, again, we'll recast this at 11:30 at London time on Wednesday as well. And then we have a podcast after this, little recap. So if you want more information, this show and all previous 227 other shows, go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Look for show number 228, and the replay and show notes and links will be there. With that in mind, thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week. And have a happy holiday. Merry Christmas. And happy Hanukkah. And enjoy everything that's joyous about the holiday season.
Kwanzaa.
And Festivus.
Yep. And Festus for the rest of us. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Stop recording. Thank you.